Mijn nachtmerrie. Vannacht heb ik het weer gedroomd.
Van het gouden ei. Dat je opgesloten zat in het gouden ei en niet uit kon en eeuwig alleen verdrent.
Ja, afschuwelijk is dat, die eenzaamheid.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about a Dutch film from 1988 called The Vanishing, or in Dutch it's like Spoorloos, if I'm pronouncing that correct.
Yeah.
If we have any Dutch viewers out there, let me know.
Yeah.
First time seeing this movie. I'm curious your thoughts, Jake.
Yeah, my first time seeing it as well. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I went in not knowing anything about it besides the Stanley Kubrick comment that it's like the most terrifying movie he's ever seen. So the whole movie I was waiting for it to get scary, and it never did.
Same.
But, I mean, that was... Like, I don't know if I was disappointed, but I still liked the movie. I thought it was pretty well done. And, like, it was captivating in, like, a very, like, I don't want to say mundane way, but, like, it's very, like, monotonal in, like, the action. Like, there aren't really, like, peaks of action.
No.
It's just kind of like events that are happening. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
So, same thing. I just knew that. I think you even told me it, that Stanley Kubrick said this is like the scariest movie he's ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that. I mean, from the guy who made The Shining, I expected it to be pretty, like, terrifying. I get it. There are some scary parts. Like, the ending is horrifying, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that, obviously. I know we always say that, but we'll get into it. I had that expectation too. I went in knowing nothing except that. If I had not even heard that, I think that would have helped. I think going in completely blind is the way to see this movie.
Yeah.
So, viewers and listeners, go watch it right now.
Yeah.
Or even hopefully you've watched it before this. But I liked it. I didn't love it. It's done really well. The acting's really good. It's very realistic.
Yes. Yeah.
And I like movies that are like that. And this movie's almost too realistic, and I think that, again, that's kind of why it's scary to Kubrick and other people, and some parts for me.
Yeah. Like scary and terrifying are not the right descriptors for this movie. I think, like, disturbing and off-putting are better. Like, because and like even those are like a tad bit harsh,
overdrawn.
Yeah, like it's like off-putting, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. Like, you're constantly, I would kind of call it a thriller, because you have no idea where this movie is going, like, throughout the entire thing. Like, it's kind of a, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but, like, in some of our recent discussions, the past few movies, we've talked about how it really amps things up or raises the stakes when the audience knows something that the main characters don't. In this, you know nothing more than the main character does.
Yeah.
Besides who the killer is.
Yes.
But you don't know why he's doing this. You don't know if Saskia is even dead. Like, you know absolutely nothing. And yeah, like off-putting is the best way I can think of to describe it, because you're just kind of along for the ride with Rex, waiting to see what the fuck is gonna happen. You know,
Yeah.
like you don't know what Raymond the killer is gonna do.
And I feel like you still don't even know at the end of the movie, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like, and that I think that's the horror aspect of it, and I want to get into that as well.
Yeah.
I think this movie is the dissection of two characters, and that's the mind of the serial killer and his obsession with, being a serial killer. And then you've got, in Raymond's character, and then you've got Rex, who his obsession is figuring out why his wife disappeared and what happened to her. And I think it's crazy to see the two different directions these characters go, and then they meet up at the end. It's interesting because it's like you said, like, you as the viewer, you want to know what happened to Saskia as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
And what's interesting about the way that those two are characterized is they're almost each an inverse of the typical, like, archetype of that character. So, like, they're almost, the roles are reversed almost. Where, like, usually the serial killer is the one that's, like, obsessive and out of his mind and, like,
Interesting point.
frantic, and the hero's the one that's calm and collected and trying to, figure out the mystery or whatever. Where in The Vanishing, Raymond is the one that's extremely, like, methodical and calm and has the upper hand throughout the entire film, despite being, like, incredibly self-aware that he's a sociopath and, like, like, can't really, or at least he understands that, like, he's always kind of on the edge of, like, functioning in society. When, like, Rex is, like, the normal one, supposedly, but he's, like, on the verge of losing it through most of the movie,
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting way to characterize the hero and the villain particularly in, like, a murder mystery that involves a serial killer type character.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's funny you mentioned the word frantic, because there is a movie that came out at the same year as this, 1988, with Harrison Ford, called Frantic. And his wife disappears in that movie. And it's a Roman Polanski movie. I haven't seen it in so long, and I watched it kind of young, so I probably need to rewatch it, and we probably could add it to this list of movies we're going through. But it reminded me of that movie for sure. Also, this movie was remade in America. So yeah, this is a Dutch film, and it was remade in America in, like, 92 or 93. I think it's 92, with Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland. And it was directed by the same director as the original. So, pretty interesting. And, I mean, I didn't know that until reading about this. It came out in 93. And it's apparently not as good, from what I read. It's got Sandra Bullock in it, too. Sandra Bullock is, like, the Saskia character. And Kiefer Sutherland is Rex. And Jeff Bridges is the serial killer. Pretty interesting. I think we should give it a watch just to compare it.
It's also pretty interesting that I don't think I saw that anywhere when searching for this movie.
Interesting.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's the same director, George Sluizer, if I'm pronouncing that right. And I'm probably going to botch a lot of these names when I say them, so I apologize if I'm botching these names. We are American after all, and we tend to do that. But Yeah, there's some decent trivia on it. So the writer Tim Krabe, again, if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. He wrote both the novel and the screenplay for this movie, and that it was adapted from, and based the story on a newspaper article that he accidentally read about a female tourist who disappeared from a bus trip after buying chewing gum at a gas station in France. The police had searched for 2 nights without finding a trace of the girl. 10 years later, Krabe did extensive research and found that the girl had turned up alive and well 1 day later. She had simply boarded the wrong bus. Krabe even called her to thank her for providing him with the inspiration for the story. So pretty interesting that the inspiration came from that.
Yeah.
It's a good story, and again, it's very realistic, and Tim Krabe pulled upon that real story to write something, and this movie feels so real. I mean, my significant other is always worried about abduction and people and guys and everything, and there's just a whole world out there that we tend to ignore almost, or just don't realize is out there, of these killers. I mean, it's obviously we watch this in cinema, but we never think it's going to happen to us, and it's definitely possible. There's a small percentage that it can happen to you. It's just the fact that this movie just feels so real makes it creepy.
Yeah. There's just there's something about the way that Raymond also practices that's really creepy and disturbing. Even pantomiming everything by himself at his second house, it's weird. And those are the things I think that are the most disturbing parts of the movie, are when you're kind of forced to watch Raymond and you don't know if he's going to succeed or not.
Yeah, it's interesting through his trials and attempts at trying to kidnap a woman, and I think that you're deliberately in the dark on that, because it's you're almost put in the view of the protagonist Rex, where it's you don't know what he's going to do with these girls or with the people he kidnaps. You never see it. You expect to see it. I'm always there's a shot where he's at his other house, and he's coming out of this almost looks like a barn or somewhere where he would have Saskia, and he walks away from her. You're oh, are you gonna see her? That's the exact thought I had when I was watching that scene. I was oh, she's kidnapped here. Is he, is it gonna reveal what he's doing to her? But it never comes. And so you're put in that mindset of Rex where you just are you want to know, and it eats at you the entire movie.
And there's a scene too that's pretty brief, but he's carrying a mattress into the house when he's not living there. Which is another weird thing, and that's another part where you're oh, they're gonna show her, and then they just never address that again. So there's a lot of moments where the movie kind of teases you a bit and makes you think you're gonna get the resolution, and then it pulls it away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that's good filmmaking. I think that's good story. But I want to know.
I do think it's very compelling that they did restrict the audience's knowledge so much, and it really makes you, or puts you as close as you possibly can be into Rex's mindset. And I feel if they would have showed the outcome halfway through the movie, the second half of the movie wouldn't be...
You wouldn't have that payoff.
Yeah, you wouldn't have the payoff, and you wouldn't like, because part of the payoff too is that you still don't really know what happened to Saskia.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though shit happens to Rex, but like, why would you believe what Raymond has to say at that point? You know,
I know.
there's no reason to.
Yeah, that ending also kind of pisses me off. How he let's just get into it. I want to get into it because it pissed me off. It's like, Raymond's been taunting Rex for like 3 years, sending him postcards and like stalking him, which is pretty interesting. And then, he finally like Rex goes on the news and like speaks his mind and gives a ploy to try and meet this killer, and then they meet up and he attacks him and hits him like he's fucking 3 years old, and like tries to like windmill hit him, which I was like, okay, like that was annoying to me, that part. But it's like, I get it. It's like, guy's overwhelmed and he doesn't know what he's doing.
They're European.
Yeah, and like that was weird. And then he's just like, all right, let's go on a drive, and it's just like, what? Like, why would you even get in a car with this fucking guy? I mean, again, it's the 80s and it's different time, and it's a foreign country, and Americans, I guess, are a little different in that regard, and we've all seen too many movies, especially now in our age. But and then they go to the same bus stop, and he's like told to drink this sleeping pill agent. And it's like, why would you even do that? That's dumb. Like, obviously you kind of know, like, he's just fucking with him. Yeah. And he goes and sees the rocks that they buried the 2 coins under that like signified their love, that they'll never leave each other. And he sees that they're still there, and it's like, fuck, well, I need to know what happens. And it's just like, he's on the brink of a mental breakdown, and he kind of has that mental breakdown where he like runs around the tree like 3 times, and then he takes the sleeping agent, and it's just like, ugh. I mean, I like that he threw it first in his face. I liked that because I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, he's not going to do it, but then he takes it, and you're just like, oh, come on, what are you doing? It's like rule number 1: don't do that.
Yeah. Like, so it's funny that you say that, because after watching the movie, I went and looked at the Wikipedia article, one, to see if there was any like insight into anything, which there isn't much. But 2, I wanted to look at critical reception, and like any like commentary that exists on it, and there's 2 quotes that I think are really fantastic at describing like what's going on in this movie. The first is from Roger Ebert. He says, "One of the most intriguing things about The Vanishing is the film's unusual structure, which builds suspense even while it seems to be telling us almost everything we want to know," which I think is spot on. Because like we said, you learn everything at the exact time that Rex does, basically. But then Dave Kerr, writing for the Tribune, said, "It's a film that functions on curiosity rather than real interest, yet in the end punishes the audience for wanting to have its questions answered," which I think is dead on.
Yeah.
Like you end up in the same position that Rex is for watching the whole movie. And I think that's kind of a brilliant analysis.
Definitely. And I mean, us as viewers, we want answers to questions.
Yeah.
And when we don't get them, we're pissed and frustrated. And that can make or break the viewing experience. But it also can, like, it makes you talk about the film. It makes it a divisive ending. You know what I mean? It's a conversation starter, I guess. But let's talk about the ending. I know we're not going in the same structure as we normally do, or try to do, and maybe the movie's influence on that.
Yeah.
But the ending of the movie is terrifying, and I kind of read a little bit about the ending as I was watching, because I was
Oh,
like
you
reading
cheater.
the wiki. I know I don't like Wikipedia that much, but like, because it's not a very valid source. And it's funny you always look at it, because I looked at it and I like kind of read a little bit of the plot right at the end, and I was just like, oh fuck, like I kind of spoiled it, but it was still scary at the end, because he just wakes up in a coffin, buried alive, and never gets the answer. But also, like, you think, did he do that to? Like, did he do that because Saskia had the same experience? But I don't think she did.
Well,
I don't think
right.
the same.
And that's the question that you're left with.
There's multiple questions.
Yeah, but that one is that how Saskia actually died? So is Raymond telling the truth to Rex by killing him in this supposedly the same way that Saskia was killed? But then you have to ask the question, did he even kill her to begin with? And that's never answered. I think, it's interesting that, this kind of plays into Raymond's psyche, where it's all kind of stems from, he talks while him and Rex are driving around France. He's kind of telling this, giving the monologue about his sociopathy or whatever, and like how he figured out that he was a sociopath. And basically said that like as a kid he
Jumped off a balcony.
And like he makes this interesting statement that he's destined to not jump off the balcony because that's like the most logical thing to do, but he believed that he can break like fate or destiny, and the only way to do that would be to jump. So like he has this like kind of complex about fate and destiny and like what he's like supposed to do versus what he wants to do, or like something along those lines. So anyway, he jumps as a kid and like breaks his arm and like loses fingers or something, he said, which they never really show, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But then later, he describes how he saved a little girl from drowning in like a channel, and how his daughter was like unbelievably proud of him and like kept calling him a hero and all this stuff. And he felt that, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is kind of how I heard it. And this is all in subtitles, so I really tried to pay attention, but I might have missed something. So his daughter's telling him he's a hero, and like she's like incredibly impressed with him, and he thinks to himself, well, the only way I'm actually deserving of this admiration is if I could think about doing the complete opposite of saving that drowning child and not go through with it, I believe is what he said, which implies that he wants to kill someone.
Interesting.
However,
yeah, I would agree. Go on.
and like that's, I think, important to the ending, because if he were to have, I mean, we know he kidnapped Saskia, for sure. If he were to have kidnapped her, took her back to that house, and almost killed her and let her go, then he's proving to himself that he is the hero that his daughter thinks he is, in like his weird
Interesting.
twisted way. But then he kills Rex, so it's an odd kind of it's an odd thing to me, unless he just can't help himself.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of ways to dissect this.
Yeah.
You know, because he jumps off the balcony, hurts himself. He jumps off the bridge into the channel, saves the girl. Now he needs to jump off the metaphorical bridge and kill someone.
Yeah,
I think it's
right.
like there's the three things that he's like, all right, well, if I could do this, I'm good. If I could do this, I'm also good. But now I need to do this. And that's why you see that methodology of him with the chloroform and in the car and all that. It's so, and that's what's creepy. And like, that's how I look at it. It's weird seeing the steps of him becoming that killer and him with that monologue talking about it in the car. Yeah, I think he killed Saskia. I think she's dead.
I do too. I think he did. And there's a small detail during his practice sessions that recurs over and over again, and it's that he inhales the chloroform usually at some point when he's practicing. And I think it's to like psych himself up to go through with the act. And I don't believe he actually does that with Saskia, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, because you can see him. He's like sweating profusely in the gas station, and then he just has like a very normal, delicate conversation with her.
Yeah.
And then it's just like you see that picture of his family on the dash, and that's what gives Saskia the mental note to be like, oh, this guy's a family man, cute. I'll get in the car,
Right.
and that's when he goes for it. It's like, again, it's all the methodology of it. And it's interesting seeing the steps he takes to try this, like where he goes to, he's like asking for directions, and he asks this one girl, and it's like she says
in
no.
like a busy city to
Yes.
start with.
Yes. And then there's another time where he goes and he's like out in a busy area, and he like tries to get this other girl to go with him, and she happened to like coach his daughter's like soccer or whatever.
Yeah, she like
And-
recognizes who he is, kind of.
Yeah, and like calls him out like, you're a creep, basically. So it's pretty interesting seeing the different levels of him graduating to this kidnapper / killer. I think the acting's really good. I also like the scene where he like, I don't know if I don't remember this exactly, but if he deliberately knows or puts that spiders in that like drawer on the table when him and his family are eating to like scare his daughter into screaming, and then they all have that like scream off of like, scream, like listen for the echo. That.
Yeah.
And then he asks his neighbor like, hey, I heard some screams. Did you hear anything? And he knows that no one can hear, so he's secluded, and that gives him also the edge, which is crazy. But it's also interesting seeing him in the family dynamic. Like, he's really honest for the most part with his family, and like he is, but he isn't. And he's like a true family man. Like, he's picking his daughter up from school.
Except it's funny that he lies to his daughter about having an affair,
Yeah.
but lies to her telling her he is having an affair. Which is, like, I don't know if that's a particularly French thing, and that's just, like, cool, but that was kind of interesting that he's willing to admit to something like infidelity in order to cover up his much more heinous obsession,
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, and I want to talk about the golden eggs. And the 2 golden eggs in the dream that Saskia has about she's the one golden egg and she's all alone. And then she has another dream where she has 2 eggs. There's another egg and she's not alone. And then Rex has the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of symbolism with this. Like when he leaves her in the beginning in the car, when the car breaks down or doesn't break down, excuse me, it loses gas. It's out of gas, runs out of gas. The tunnel is like egg shaped.
Mm-hmm.
And she's standing at the end of it. And he's, sees her at the end of the tunnel. And it's like that light at the end of the tunnel of there she is. And what you realize is like, eggs are the symbolization of birth, but it's the opposite of birth in this. It's death. And she is that lone egg at the end. And then you have Rex that has this same dream where he's like the golden eggs and he like goes crazy kind of. Mm-hmm. And at the end, you obviously assume he dies because he's buried alive. And the end, you see an article in the back of like the car, I think it is the car window, and you see their faces in 2 eggs that they finally have come together in death. And so that's, again, another reason I think that Saskia has been killed by Raymond. And it's just a very interesting way to symbolize birth and death at the same time, and like the dream of that.
Yeah. Like in a metaphorical sense, like he's kind of given like a fresh start once he understands what happened to Saskia. Just kind of that like rebirth
but he never does.
Whatever.
But he does.
It's short-lived.
He finds it. Well, he never finds out, and I guess in death he finds out because he's with her, if you will, in rebirth.
Yeah,
you could say.
It's like, from a literal sense, if they're both buried in a box, that's like a being stuck in an egg. I think the more symbolic like way to interpret it is that like they are together but they're separate.
Yeah.
And they're
together again in death.
Yeah, but right.
They're depends on what you believe. But they're not.
Yeah, I mean like it's they like whatever you want to like say, like they're aware that each other are there now, and but like they can't be with each other because they're encapsulated in these 2 separate things. So they're together but separate.
Yeah,
flying through space, as they say.
Yep. The director compares this to like Romeo and Juliet, how they like, they both die at the end, and it's like one fakes their death and then the other one is like, oh no, they're dead, and dies. So it's pretty interesting that he, and he compares it to that because in death they're united forever, and that's why he like relates it to Romeo and Juliet, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you have to believe that Rex knows that he's going to die when he drinks the coffee.
See, I don't know. Like
there's a pretty solid chance that he's not making it.
I mean, us as viewers know that. I hope. I don't know. And maybe that's why he has that nervous breakdown, and then with the coins, and it symbolizes that, where he's like, all right, well, I guess she's dead, and I'm going to find out.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to die too.
I think for him, the most important thing is getting the answers.
Yeah. But he doesn't get that, and then him laughing in there, knowing he technically doesn't get the answers, is the truly terrifying part. And that's like where I was like, oh, okay, that is scary of him not knowing and being trapped. Imagine being trapped in a coffin, buried alive, as your body eats itself because it's starving and you die. Fucking
Suffocating
terrible.
to death, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of
Horrible.
It's not not good.
That's the scary part. Yeah, I mean, Entertainment Weekly apparently ranked this as the 25th scariest movie of all time, which is kind of funny.
Scary is not the right word.
I know. Off-putting, like you said, or disturbing or creepy.
Yeah.
Apparently, the director filmed an alternative ending in which Raymond was caught by the police. The ending was never used because he thought the impact was not there that it had on the initial ending. Mm-hmm. Pretty interesting that he did that. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty interesting movie in that it is Dutch, but it's predominantly French.
Yeah.
And more French is spoken predominantly. And it was submitted for an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film for Dutch, but it got disqualified because there's too much French in it, which is pretty interesting and kind of disappointing.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what I read about the whole Stanley Kubrick thing is Stanley Kubrick called George Sluizier, again if I'm pronouncing, or Sluizier, called him after watching it to tell him it's the most terrifying movie he'd ever seen. He had seen it 10 times then and was impressed with the film's structure and ending, as well as the performance of the actress Saskia. So impressed that he said he was offered her to a role in one of his uncompleted films. And Sluizer was skeptical of Kubrick finding this film so scary. He's like, well, you directed The Shining. Haven't you seen that? To which Kubrick immediately replied, yeah, but that was child's play compared to this. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. You know, The Shining's kind of supernatural a little bit. There's that supernatural element to it.
Yeah.
Versus this doesn't have that. Again, it's realistic horror, which makes it terrifying in Kubrick's words.
Yeah. And I think it's maybe it is just what your mindset is around horror.
Yes.
If you prefer the true crime, realistic, kind of horror, this is a scarier movie than any ghost story, or whatever. So I can see that.
Again, having the notion that it's terrifying kind of defeats the purpose of it.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Like, I do wish I had gone in completely blind, not knowing that comment was made. And maybe I'd have a different opinion, but I don't know. It is definitely creepy and you can tell, like, and I want to ask you about this, but like one of the things that really was off-putting to me was that a lot of the dialogue is near silent in this movie that I noticed.
Like the volume level of the dialogue?
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe I didn't notice that. I mean, I watched it on like Monday, and we're recording a number of days later. And I mean, this is a movie that's foreign language to us, so it is subtitled, like we said in the beginning. So, I mean, I'm reading the subtitles. That also doesn't help with this movie in that. I mean, I'm not a big subtitle reading guy. Me
either.
I'm not,
I tried to find an English dub, and it doesn't exist.
Call me a boring, lazy American, sure, but I don't know. I
can't focus on what's happening if I have to read.
Maybe it's just part of our generation. We can't multitask or something. I don't know. But, I mean, I'd rather pay attention than read. And it's harder to do both sometimes, where it's like I want to be I mean, and granted, I'm taking notes during this. I'm also pausing it to take my notes. So it's like, it's interesting.
I do appreciate this movie is not particularly dialogue heavy. I mean, there's a fair amount, but it's not
I feel like it's all dialogue.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in terms of like complexity of the dialogue, it's not very difficult to follow. You know.
Yeah. Okay. In that regard, I agree with you.
It's not dense. I'll put it that way. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to follow.
Yeah, but like I noticed, and I checked my sound system to make sure that it was on a few times because
really.
As I feel like it goes.
I don't remember
throughout
having that
the
issue.
movie. It gets quieter. I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, I know there were absolutely times where, particularly in the car, and then a couple times when Rex was talking to his new girlfriend, whose
Which
name
I want to
can't
talk
remember.
about that.
Where they're talking to each other,
remember.
where there were like there were subtitles on the screen, and people's mouths were moving, and there was not any words being spoken that I could
Interesting.
hear. And like maybe it's just like maybe French people are better at hearing whispers and interpreting what people are saying. I don't know.
I don't remember having that issue.
Maybe I'm like losing my mind. I don't know. But I pumped my volume up during some of these scenes and it didn't get louder. And like there's ambient noise that I could hear. So it wasn't like it wasn't like an issue with like the streaming or anything like that. Like there was actual sound from the movie. So anyway, if what I'm saying is real and it was intentional that they pushed the dialogue down in volume throughout the film, that also gives the audience like an off-putting kind of feeling as you're straining to hear what's going on and like wondering if there's going to be like a loud, reaction or like a violent reaction to something, and like that kind of builds that underlying tension and anticipation throughout the whole movie, especially the parts where Rex and Raymond are together interacting. So yeah, maybe I'm right about that. If I'm not, tell me, because
I don't remember, and I'm sorry. I know we we just watched this, but again, this isn't our day job. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to. It's like I'm not gonna go back and rewatch it, to be honest. I would maybe watch the remake, but not for a while. I was kind of bothered by the new girlfriend. I looked up her name, and I don't remember it ever being said, but it's Lienke or something.
Lanky, I think.
Yeah. Again, pronunciation,
Lenka,
I apologize.
Something like that.
It was interesting. I thought like it was his sister or something when they like first are shown in the car. But like I'm shocked she like stays with him as he's obsessing over this, ex-girlfriend, but then obviously she does leave him. Yeah. But it's just interesting. I'm like, whoa, okay, all right, this girl's okay with that. And then
I think the only reason she's in it is to show that he's willing to sacrifice almost anything in order to clear up this mystery.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of why her character exists.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, I will, like I said, I'll probably never watch this movie again. It's our second foreign film of the podcast. Our first was Ron. Third? What was this?
Paris, Texas was technically foreign.
Yeah.
Even though I think it was all shot in the U.S., wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a foreign director, but it's an American movie. I'm pretty sure. I don't think it's considered a foreign film.
Oh, I thought it was all foreign funding and studios and stuff. I could be wrong about that, but
Maybe.
yeah, this is second or third.
Well, yeah. I want to look that up now. Co-production between companies in France and West Germany, but it is an English-spoken film.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it's considered a foreign film. Interesting. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
You schooled me. I think these foreign films we've watched have provided very good conversation. I like watching them. Again, it's hard with subtitles sometimes. It's just hard when you don't know the language. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I've liked all of them better than you did too.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate this movie. I liked it. I just, well, like I said, I'll never watch it again. When I give it like a 3 out of 5. I guess 6 out of 10 is fine with me.
Yeah,
I
think that's fair.
I'm also quite controversial on some of my movie takes. Like there's certain movies I don't like, and I've definitely had some controversial takes on movies, and I'm sure we'll get into them. And like I think I said it in one of our podcasts where I was like, Christopher Nolan is a great director, but he's also like kind of shit sometimes. Like I just watched Interstellar, and it's like there's some parts in that movie where it's like, this is dumb. This is dumb as shit. And otherwise like it's surrounded by amazing.
It's really cool, but some of it is like I'm trying to think of the right word. Self-gratifying. Like he's just kind of doing shit in that movie just to be like, look at this space shit and how much I know about space, you know?
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Like, I'm a genius.
Yeah.
I get that. I don't think he's intentionally doing that.
No, I don't think so. I think he's just like, passionate about it, and he's like, yes, I want to include this and this and this and this. And like, it's like, okay, most people don't want to sit through a 10-minute scene about quantum equations.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could literally do a whole episode on his movies, and ones I think are okay and overrated. Most of them I think are overrated. But I like them. Like Inception's great, Prestige is great, Insomnia's great, Memento's great, but they're all overrated for the most part.
I don't know. The Prestige might be
my favorite
movie from him.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Prestige is my favorite.
Followed by The Dark Knight.
You know, I think The Dark Knight's overhyped.
I think it's the best Batman movie.
I mean, I would agree. Yeah, well, okay. We're getting off topic. But that's pretty much all I have to say about The Vanishing anyway. So
yeah, it's good. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever watch it again. Mostly because there's no English dub. If there's an English dub, I would probably watch it again.
English dubs take me out of it though a little bit. I just watched Godzilla -1 on the English dub, and it's just like, I don't know. I don't know if it's goofy. It's a little goofy.
If they're done well, it's different. But
yeah, true.
I mean, I don't know. Like the lip syncing doesn't really bother me, or the lip mismatch doesn't really bother me. What does bother me is when the voice actor and the real actor like don't match.
That's why it takes me out of it.
Like sometimes that happens, not all the time, but
yeah,
sometimes that happens for sure.
What's our next movie? I know we're eventually, and we want to maybe hear some input from you guys. Is we want to start maybe releasing our schedule so you guys know what movies we're watching. Are we doing Blade Runner next?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
I'm
nice.
Very excited.
Yeah, so we'll be doing a Harrison Ford movie, Blade Runner. I'm excited for that.
I haven't watched a good 3-hour movie in a long time, so
It's not that long.
the final cut isn't it?
No, there's like the work print that's like 3 hours. And we'll get into that because there's so many different fucking versions of that movie.
Yeah. We're
But,
watching the final cut, right?
I think so. I have the theatrical cut. We could watch it.
I gotta check which
we'll
version I have.
We'll
I know I
discuss
have the
that.
final cut, but I don't know if it came with the theatrical or not.
Yeah.
I gotta check.
So, yeah, we'll be watching the Blade Runner next week. We don't know which version yet.
Yeah. Just watch them all.
We'll, yeah. Back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
And then watch the new one. 2049. So, yeah, I think we'll enjoy that podcast next. I enjoyed this one. Again, there's always fun stuff to talk about with movies like this. So, we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next week in 2019 Blade Runner.
Yep.
Right? Isn't it 2019?
Yes,
pretty sure.
actually, I think it is.
Cool. All right. We'll see you guys then.
See ya.